The question hit the room like shattered glass. Why does your daughter call me mommy? The air in the boardroom turned heavy, thick enough to suffocate. The skyline shimmered beyond the glass walls, but inside everything felt frozen. A billionaire CEO stood at the head of the table, her perfectly controlled world suddenly trembling because of one small child's innocent voice echoing in her memory. And across from her stood a man in a simple navy uniform, hands rough from work, eyes carrying a lifetime of storms. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of love that changes lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that humanity still exists in unexpected places. The single father's name was Daniel Reyes. 3 years earlier, he had walked into that same building not as a contractor, not as an employee, but as a desperate man carrying a sleeping 5-year-old girl in his arms. His wife had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm, leaving him alone with medical debt, grief, and a daughter who cried every night for a mother who would never come home. Daniel had once been a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm. When his wife fell ill, he had burned through his savings paying hospital bills, cutting hours, and eventually losing his job. By the time she passed, the apartment was weeks from eviction. Pride had left him long before hope did. He took whatever work he could find, night shifts cleaning offices, repairing HVAC systems, scrubbing floors in the same towers where executives negotiated million-dollar deals. One of those towers belonged to Aurora Dynamics, led by the formidable CEO, Evelyn Carter. She was known in business magazines as ruthless but visionary. She had built the company from a near-bankrupt tech startup into a global enterprise. Employees respected her. Competitors feared her. The public saw polished interviews and awards ceremonies. Very few saw the lonely penthouse she returned to every night. The first time Daniel brought his daughter Sophia to the building, it wasn't by choice. The daycare had shut down unexpectedly, and he couldn't afford to lose another job. He tucked Sophia into a corner of the janitorial closet with a blanket and coloring book while he cleaned the upper floors. He checked on her every 15 minutes, heart racing each time he left her alone. That night, Evelyn Carter had stayed late preparing for a high-stakes international merger. She rarely noticed the maintenance staff, not out of cruelty but out of tunnel vision. Her life revolved around performance metrics, shareholder confidence, and strategic acquisition. When she stepped out of the elevator and saw a little girl sitting cross-legged near the reception desk drawing on scrap paper, she paused. Sophia looked up with wide brown eyes that held both innocence and exhaustion. She didn't seem afraid. She simply studied Evelyn with quiet curiosity, the way children do when they sense something important but don't understand it. Evelyn had asked security why a child was in the building. Daniel rushed forward, apologizing repeatedly, explaining in a trembling voice that he had no one else to watch her. He expected to be fired on the spot. Instead, Evelyn did something unexpected. She crouched to Sophia's level and asked what she was drawing. The little girl held up a crayon picture of a tall building with a smiling woman at the top and a small stick figure holding her hand. It was simple, uneven, but full of warmth. Over the next weeks, Sophia sometimes accompanied Daniel when childcare fell through. Evelyn would occasionally encounter her in the lobby or cafeteria. Something about the child unsettled her, not in a negative way, but in a way that stirred something she had buried long ago. Evelyn had grown up in foster care, moving between houses, always promising herself she would never depend on anyone. She built walls around her heart long before she built a company. Motherhood had never been part of her plan. Vulnerability was a liability in her world. Yet Sophia treated her not as a distant executive, but as someone familiar. She would wave enthusiastically whenever Evelyn passed by. Once she ran toward her with a handmade paper flower. Evelyn had never been given something so simple and so sincere. Daniel noticed the subtle shift. He saw how his daughter's face lit up whenever she mentioned the tall lady with the shiny shoes. He saw how Evelyn's expression softened around Sophia in a way it never did in board meetings. But he also saw the danger. He knew lines were being blurred. He reminded Sophia gently that Miss Carter was a very busy lady, not someone they should disturb. Sophia would nod, then later ask when they would see her again. Months passed. Daniel worked tirelessly, often sleeping only 4 hours a night. He enrolled in online certification courses after Sophia went to bed, determined to climb back into a stable career. He didn't want his daughter to grow up seeing him as broken. One afternoon during a company charity event hosted at the headquarters, Sophia wandered into the main conference hall. Evelyn was presenting to investors. Cameras flashed, applause filled the room. Sophia stood at the back, clutching a small stuffed rabbit. When the presentation ended and executives mingled with guests, Sophia slipped past security with the fearless determination only a child possesses. She reached Evelyn and tugged at the hem of her blazer. In a clear, innocent voice that carried across the room, Sophia said she had drawn a new picture for Mommy. Silence followed. Executives exchanged confused glances. Cameras caught the moment. Evelyn froze, the word echoing louder than any boardroom speech she had ever delivered. Daniel arrived seconds later, face pale, heart pounding. He pulled Sophia gently back, apologizing over and over, mortified beyond measure. That incident could have ended everything. Instead, Evelyn asked Daniel to meet her in her office the next morning. And now, standing across from him in that sunlit room, she finally asked the question that had haunted her since that day. "Why does your daughter call me Mommy?" Daniel swallowed hard. He had rehearsed explanations all night, but none felt sufficient. His voice, when it came, was steady but raw. He explained that after his wife died, Sophia struggled to understand permanence. She would ask when her mother was coming back. He tried therapy. He tried bedtime stories about angels. Nothing filled the emptiness. Then Sophia began talking about a woman at the building who listened to her drawings, who smiled at her like she mattered. Daniel never told her to use that word. He corrected her gently at first. But Sophia insisted that Mommy wasn't just someone who gave birth. Mommy was someone who made her feel safe. Evelyn's composure cracked. For years, she had believed safety was built with contracts and capital. She had never imagined a child could define it with a smile. Daniel continued, explaining that he never meant for it to create trouble. He was trying to rebuild his life, to stand on his own feet again. He never expected emotional entanglements with the most powerful woman in the company. He cleaned at night. The silence between them shifted from accusation to something softer, more vulnerable. Evelyn asked about Sophia's routines, her school, her favorite stories. She asked about Daniel's courses and qualifications. For the first time, their conversation wasn't about an incident, but about a future. Over the next week, something extraordinary happened. Evelyn established a formal scholarship program within Aurora Dynamics for employees pursuing further education. Daniel was among the first recipients. It wasn't charity. It was an investment in potential. He began transitioning from maintenance work into a junior facilities management role, aligning with his previous experience. Sophia, meanwhile, was invited occasionally to visit during structured family-friendly company events. Boundaries were carefully drawn, but warmth was no longer denied. Evelyn found herself questioning the fortress she had built around her heart. She began volunteering at a local foster youth mentorship program, confronting memories she had avoided for decades. For the first time, her success felt incomplete without connection. Daniel struggled with pride. Accepting help had always felt like weakness, but he realized strength sometimes meant allowing others to stand beside you. He worked harder than ever, determined to prove he deserved the opportunity. One evening, as autumn painted the city in gold, Sophia presented Evelyn with another drawing. This time, it showed three figures under a large tree. The tallest one wore a suit. The middle one had messy hair. The smallest one held both their hands. There was no label this time, just a family drawn in crayon. Evelyn did not correct her. She did not define it. She simply understood that love did not always fit corporate definitions or biological boundaries. Months turned into a year. Daniel earned a permanent management position. His salary stabilized. He moved Sophia into a small but bright apartment with real furniture and a bedroom painted her favorite shade of lavender. Evelyn attended Sophia's school recital quietly, sitting in the back row. She clapped harder than anyone when Sophia sang. The board of directors noticed changes in Evelyn, too. She became more empathetic in leadership, introducing family support initiatives and mental health resources. Productivity rose. Loyalty deepened. The company flourished not despite compassion, but because of it. The question that once shattered the room had become the foundation of something transformative. Evelyn eventually admitted to Daniel that she had always feared motherhood because she associated it with instability and loss. Sophia taught her that motherhood could also mean presence, guidance, and chosen love. Daniel admitted he had feared losing his dignity more than losing opportunity. He realized that vulnerability had opened doors pride would have kept locked. Their relationship evolved slowly, respectfully, built on shared healing rather than sudden romance. They attended community events together. They discussed parenting philosophies. They navigated whispers and public curiosity with quiet confidence. But the true heart of the story was never corporate success or public perception. It was a little girl who redefined love with one innocent word. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your engagement helps spread messages of hope to people who might be struggling silently tonight. And before we reach the final moments, I have a special request for you. In the comments below, write one word that represents what family means to you. Your word might inspire someone else reading it. Years later, during Aurora Dynamics' 20th anniversary gala, Evelyn stood on stage reflecting on her journey. She spoke about resilience, innovation, and growth. Then she paused and looked toward the front row. Daniel sat beside Sophia, who was now taller, more confident, smiling with the same warmth that had once melted a fortress of steel. Evelyn shared that the most important lesson she had learned in leadership did not come from a business school or a merger. It came from a child who believed love could be chosen. The audience applauded not because of financial milestones, but because they felt the sincerity behind her words. After the event, Sophia ran to Evelyn and wrapped her arms around her waist. There was no confusion now, no embarrassment, no scandal, just belonging. The skyline outside the tower still glittered ambitious and cold. But inside, something softer had taken root. A single father had fought through grief and humiliation to protect his daughter's heart. A powerful CEO had allowed herself to be vulnerable enough to let love in, and a child had bridged two broken worlds with a single, fearless word. Sometimes the most life-changing questions are not asked in boardrooms for profit, but in moments of unexpected truth. Why does your daughter call me mommy? Because love, when given freely and received courageously, creates families in ways no contract ever could. If this story moved you, please don't scroll away silently. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Because somewhere out there, another Daniel is struggling, another Evelyn is hiding behind success, and another Sophia is waiting for someone to feel safe with. And maybe, just maybe, your kindness can help them find each other. The first time Sophia slipped her small hand into Evelyn's during a crowded company picnic, no one gasped, no one whispered, no one questioned it. Because by then, the story that had once begun with shock had quietly become something beautiful. But healing is never a straight road. Even after stability returned to Daniel's life, even after Evelyn allowed herself to soften, the past still lingered in the corners of their days like an unfinished sentence. Part 2 begins not with a crisis, but with a test. 6 months after the anniversary gala, Aurora Dynamics faced the biggest challenge in its history. A multinational competitor launched a hostile takeover attempt, spreading rumors that Evelyn's emotional leadership shift had weakened the company's aggressive edge. Share prices dipped. Investors grew nervous. Media headlines questioned whether compassion had made the once-steel CEO too soft. Evelyn stood once again in the same boardroom where she had first asked Daniel that life-altering question. The skyline looked identical. The stakes felt even higher. Board members suggested drastic cost-cutting measures, layoffs, elimination of family programs, canceling mentorship initiatives. They framed it as necessary survival. Evelyn listened quietly. 3 years ago, she might have agreed without hesitation, but something had changed. She had seen what stability did for Daniel. She had seen how productivity soared when employees felt valued beyond their output. She had witnessed how loyalty replaced fear. She refused to dismantle the very culture that had strengthened the company from within. Meanwhile, Daniel sensed the tension long before official announcements were made. As facilities manager, he overheard anxious conversations in hallways. Employees worried about their futures. Some blamed the new initiatives for the financial vulnerability. Daniel felt guilt creep into his chest. What if his story had unintentionally contributed to this narrative? What if Evelyn's compassion toward him had cost her power? One evening, after picking Sophia up from school, Daniel sat in the car longer than usual. Sophia was now 9, perceptive and thoughtful. She noticed the furrow in his brow. He realized something powerful in that moment. For years, he had fought to protect her from instability. Now, she was the one reminding him what stability truly meant. The next day, Daniel did something bold. He requested time to speak at the internal employee town hall meeting. He wasn't a high-ranking executive, he wasn't a public speaker, but he carried authenticity. Standing on stage before hundreds of employees, Daniel shared his journey, not as a dramatic tale, but as proof of what opportunity could create. He explained how the scholarship program had allowed him to rebuild his qualifications, how mentorship had restored his confidence, and how feeling seen had transformed his work ethic. He wasn't pleading, he was demonstrating. He told them that Aurora's strength wasn't in cold efficiency alone. It was in the loyalty forged when leadership cared. He reminded them that innovation thrives where people feel safe enough to think boldly. Evelyn watched from the side of the stage, eyes shining with quiet pride. She hadn't orchestrated this. She hadn't asked him to defend her. He chose to stand up, fought. Coots. The speech circulated internally. Employees began sharing their own stories, parents supported through childcare grants, veterans retrained through new programs, interns mentored into leadership tracks. The narrative shifted. Investors noticed the unusual unity. When the competitor attempted to exploit internal weakness, they found something unexpected instead: solidarity. Within months, the takeover attempt failed. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was cultural. At home, life continued unfolding in gentle, ordinary miracles. Sophia lost her first tooth and insisted on placing it under her pillow, even though she claimed to be too old for the tooth fairy. Daniel helped with math homework at the kitchen table while Evelyn joined via video call from overseas trips. Their bond evolved naturally. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was built on shared responsibility, mutual respect, and deep emotional honesty. One rainy afternoon, Sophia asked Daniel a question that stopped him mid-step. She asked if it was okay to love two moms. Daniel felt the old ache in his chest, the memory of his late wife never far from the surface. He knelt beside his daughter and told her something he had finally learned himself. Love is not a limited resource. Loving someone new does not erase loving someone who is loving someone who is gone. That evening, Daniel visited his wife's grave for the first time in months. He brought fresh flowers and sat quietly, speaking aloud to the woman who had once held their family together. He told her about Sophia's laughter, about Evelyn's kindness, about how life had somehow found its way back to light. Grief no longer felt like drowning. It felt like a quiet river he could sit beside. Evelyn faced her own reckoning, too. During a foster youth mentorship event, a teenage girl asked her if success was worth being alone. The question pierced deeper than any business critique ever had. Evelyn realized she had spent decades proving her worth to the world while denying her own need for connection. Sophia had cracked open that truth. Daniel had reinforced it with steady, grounded love. One winter evening, beneath soft city lights, Daniel invited Evelyn to the modest apartment he once feared losing. It had changed. Those walls now held framed photos, Sophia's school projects, candid snapshots from company picnics, even a picture of the three of them under the crayon-drawn tree recreated at a park. He didn't propose with fireworks or spectacle. He simply expressed gratitude for the chance to build something together, not out of rescue or obligation, but out of shared growth. Evelyn said yes with tears she no longer tried to hide. Their wedding was intimate. Employees attended alongside foster youth from Evelyn's program. There were no headlines, no extravagant displays, just authenticity. Sophia walked down the aisle carrying a bouquet almost as big as her smile. During the ceremony, Evelyn knelt to Sophia's level and made her own promise. Not to replace anyone, not to claim ownership of a title, but to remain present, supportive, and honest. The word umami was never formally assigned again. It simply existed naturally, tenderly, whenever Sophia chose to use it. Years passed. Aurora Dynamics became known not only for innovation but for humane leadership. Business schools studied its culture transformation. Articles cited data and strategy. Few understood the emotional origin story behind it all. Daniel eventually became director of operations, respected not for a dramatic backstory but for consistent excellence. He mentored younger employees, especially single parents struggling to balance ambition and responsibility. Sophia grew into a confident teenager who volunteered at the same foster mentorship program that once helped shape Evelyn's healing. One evening, as the three of them sat on a balcony overlooking the same skyline that once felt intimidating, Sophia reflected on how strange it was that one word had changed everything. Evelyn looked at Daniel and smiled softly. She admitted that the question she once asked in shock had been the most important question of her life. "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" The answer had never been about biology. It had been about presence, about showing up repeatedly, consistently, without expectation, about choosing love even when it felt risky, and about allowing oneself to be chosen in return. Before we close this story, if it has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in healing and second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that compassion is not weakness, it is strength. Your engagement doesn't just support a channel, it spreads stories that might encourage someone fighting silent battles. And one last heartfelt request. If this story moved you, write in the comments, "Love creates family." Let those words echo for someone who needs them tonight. Because somewhere in a tall glass building, someone powerful may be hiding loneliness behind success. Somewhere in a small apartment, a single parent may be wondering if they are enough. And somewhere, a child may be redefining love with fearless innocence. Sometimes it only takes one unexpected question to reveal what the heart has known all along. And sometimes the most extraordinary families are not born, they are built.